Hi, everyone. Earlier this week, China and the European Union concluded a meeting known as the Sixth High Level Dialogue on Climate and the Environment. Included within the discussion on the official readout were topics like the carbon market and also the carbon border adjustment mechanism. In today's episode, I'd like to go through some of the main implications with you coming out of that meeting. So let's get right into that. The first key question arising is whether or not the European Union would actually include China as a potential source of international carbon credits that are going towards the 3% allowance that's being contemplated as part of the 2040 amendment to the European climate law. And that is in particular the 90% reduction that we've covered before on this channel. And in principle, the European Union is going to rely very heavily on China for other things relating to its overall emissions cuts. And in particular, the supply of critical minerals that are going to be needed for the energy transition. So there are good reasons for the European Union to want to cooperate with China in these kinds of areas. However, at the same time, the European Union is also introducing the carbon border adjustment mechanism, and it's looking to cover steel, cement, aluminium, hydrogen, electricity, and also fertiliser, so 6 sectors. Now, it seems quite improbable that the European Union would want to be purchasing carbon credits from the very sectors that it is also covering and trying to equalize in terms of the playing field with European producers. So I would say it's quite improbable at this point in time that any projects within those 6 sectors would be included within any scope of carbon credits being purchased by the European Union or entities authorized in the European Union for that international carbon credit allowance that's being proposed for the 2040 emissions cut. The next key question is whether or not China would allow the export of carbon credits to the European Union under this proposal. As we know, China's got some reasonably ambitious climate plans of its own, and recent reports have also suggested that they're a little bit behind schedule. So the key question here is whether China would want to sell carbon credits on its territory to the European Union. Now, China already has a fairly significant trade surplus with the European Union, so there's lots of good reasons for it to want to cooperate with the EU. On the flip side, the carbon border adjustment mechanism is something that China has expressly said that it feels is protectionist. So there are other reasons to hold back a few things. And the other key element here is that China has other options for selling carbon credits if in fact it decides that it wants to do that. In particular, there are other markets that will be demanding carbon credits not only in larger volumes, but also before the European Union's demand starts to arise, which, according to the proposed amendment, would be in 2036. One specific market is going to be the CORSIA program. That's the carbon offsetting and reduction system for intercontinental aviation, which is being implemented via ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization. Now, demand for credits could be as much as 1 billion tons by mid 2030. So that's a very significant proportion of demand. It's certainly a lot larger than even the most ambitious estimates that are coming out for the European Union, which is probably around 700 million tons would be the absolute upper limit of demand. So you can see that the European Union's demand is both longer dated and also less than significant centers of demand in the international carbon market that are going to come from other programs. So there's a possibility that China will want to engage with the European Union, although in a measured way. The other important dimension here is that both China and the European Union are preparing their revised nationally determined contributions to take to the 30th Conference of the Parties of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which is going to be held in Belém in Brazil later on this year, in fact in November. Now, this high-level dialogue would have been very informative for both China and the European Union as they prepare their plans, though I'm quite sure that both groups are looking to keep a lot of their negotiating chips to themselves for the time being. But certainly, there's going to be a lot of focus on this coming up over the next few months as those NDCs are finalized and prepared for presentation at COP30 in Belém. So we'll continue to keep a very close eye on this. It's got very serious market implications on both sides, and it's a really important one to follow. So I'll look forward to bringing you more information on this in the coming weeks. On that note, I'd like to say thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to seeing you again soon in the next episode of Climate Mundial's Energy and Climate Weekly. So bye for now.